I remember the first time I felt electricity come out of the ground. I was a very small boy in our village in Japan, no taller than my grandfather's elbow. It was early summer, the rice paddies were flooded, and the mud was warm between our toes. The air smelled of wet straw and the faint sweetness of the camellia blossoms that grew along the path. He called me over to the edge of the field, where the water stood still and dark, reflecting the gray clouds that hung low over the hills. From his pocket he took two small things: a copper coin, green with age, and a nail that had once held a fence post. He pushed them into the mud, about a hand's width apart, and then he touched a thin wire to each one. He took my finger, rough and calloused from a lifetime of working wood and soil, and placed it gently on the end of the wire. I felt nothing at first, just the coolness of the metal. Then a tiny, feathery tingle, no stronger than an ant walking on my skin. He smiled, the deep lines around his eyes folding like the ridges of a field after plowing, and said, "The earth is not sleeping, little one. It is always working." That was many, many years ago, and yet today in my own garden in this vast country, I kneel down after a spring rain, and I feel that same quiet working under my hands. The memory never left me. Even now, when I push my hands into the soil beside the cucumbers, I can still see his weathered hat and the patient way he moved. It has never stopped. The earth gives and gives. And I will tell you today how to receive that gift for less than the price of a sandwich, and why the modern world has nearly forgotten it. By the end of these words, you will know exactly how to build your own earth battery, a power source that pulls a steady current straight from the dirt with no sun, no wind, and no battery that dies in 3 years. And you will understand why the big stores do not speak of it, and how it can free a small corner of your life from the endless buying and throwing away that has become so normal. I will not pretend this is magic. It is simple and old, and the university folks later confirmed it, but the farmers and the grandparents knew it first. My name is Michael. I was born in a small village in the countryside of Japan. A quick word before I go on. What I show you here grows out of the old ways the people of my country kept, where nothing was ever wasted. My family gathered the heart of it into the Home Savings Almanac, 12 small books on the old ways of the home. The kitchen and the pantry, the garden, keeping the house clean and warm. The small repairs, and 400 simple ways to waste nothing and save $200 to $400 a month. You will find it linked in the description and the first pinned comment, or you can simply scan the QR code on your screen. If you want it, it is there. I will not mention it again. Where the mountains held the clouds and the fields were carved by hand. My grandfather was a man who never threw anything away. He kept a small shed behind the house, and inside it, every bent nail, every scrap of cloth, every length of frayed rope was sorted and saved. When a wooden bucket split, he would carve a new stave and bind it with bamboo. When a rice sieve tore, he would weave a patch from the inner bark of a mulberry tree. He taught me the word matinai before I could read. It was not just a word. It was the air we breathed. I came to America as a young man, and I have lived here most of my life. My wife and I keep a small garden behind our house. We grow tomatoes, cucumbers, a few peppers, and a persimmon tree that reminds me of the tree my grandfather stood under when he told me stories. In Japan, we have that word I carry with me every day. The word is matinai. It means what a waste, but it is deeper than that. It is the ache you feel when something that could still be useful is thrown into the trash. It is the regret of seeing a bent nail straightened and kept for 10 more years, or a piece of old cloth not used to patch a shirt. I look at this country, which I love, and sometimes I feel that quiet ache. We throw away so much. We buy machines full of rare metals, use them a little while, and then bury them in the ground as if they were nothing. But the ground itself holds a power we forget to use. Matinai. Before we dig our hands into the dirt, I have a small request. Please, in the comments, tell me where you live and what kind of soil you have. Is it sandy and pale, or dark and sticky with clay? Do you have much rain, or is the ground dry most of the year? I read everyone. It helps me know who I am speaking with, and it makes this feel less like a big empty room and more like a circle of neighbors talking over a fence. Most folks, when they think about getting power away from the grid, they picture a roof full of glass panels and a closet full of heavy lithium boxes. They see a number with many zeros. They are told that this is the only way to have light without the wire from the pole. They imagine the trucks, the permits, the installers in their white vans. And it is true, a big solar array can do many things. But what I have seen, gently, is that many people forget something very old and very simple. The ground you walk on, the dirt your vegetables grow in, is already making a tiny current all day and all night, whether the sun shines or not. It does not need a glass panel. It does not need rare metals mined a continent away and shipped across the sea in 100,000 crates. You need two different metals, a bit of wire and a patch of wet earth. This is not a replacement for a whole house, no. But for a small light in the garden, a sensor that checks your soil moisture, or a quiet trickle that keeps a battery full. It is perfect, and it costs only a few coins. The kind my grandfather carried in his pocket, green with the years of waiting. Now let me show you how to make one. I will speak slowly, as if we were sitting on the porch together with a cup of green tea cooling between us. First, you must understand the heart of the thing. An earth battery is a galvanic cell. That sounds like a stiff word from a textbook, but really it is something you have seen before. If you ever pushed a copper penny and a zinc nail into a lemon and saw a small light blink, that is the same principle. The lemon juice is the electrolyte, a liquid that can carry tiny charged pieces called ions. The metals are the electrodes. One metal, zinc, is what the chemists call more reactive. It wants to give up its electrons. The other metal, copper, is less reactive. It wants to take them in. When you put both into a wet, conductive medium, the electrons travel from the zinc to the copper if you give them a wire to run through. That flow of electrons is your electric current. In the earth battery, the lemon is replaced by wet soil. And soil, when it has moisture, is full of dissolved minerals, salts, and the work of billions of tiny living things. It is not as strong as the acid inside a car battery, but it is free, it is everywhere, and it does not stop working after a few hundred charges. My grandfather showed me this with nothing more than that coin and that nail. Later, I learned that a smart man in a rainy country, a clockmaker, buried plates of zinc and copper in the ground and ran a clock from the current for years. That was nearly 200 years ago. Even before him, there are stories of ancient clay jars with two metals inside that could hold a small charge, found in old desert places. The knowing is very old. It is only the forgetting that is new. In Matinai, how we have forgotten. So here is what you need to build one yourself, step by careful step. The first material is copper. You can go to any hardware store and buy a short length of copper pipe, the kind used for water lines. A half-inch wide, half a foot long will do. Cut it into smaller sections, each about 4 to 6 inches. These are your cathodes, the positive side. The second material is zinc. The easiest way is to buy a box of galvanized nails, the ones with a gray coating that feels a little rough to the touch. That coating is zinc. Or you can get a small galvanized steel rod. These are your anodes, the negative side. The third material is wire. A small roll of insulated copper wire, maybe 18 gauge, enough to connect many cells together. You will also need a sharp knife to strip the insulation from the ends, a pair of pliers to twist the connections tight, and a small multimeter if you want to see the numbers. For 10 cells, the whole cost will be less than what you pay for a morning coffee at a busy shop. In my garden, I keep a little box of scraps. Offcuts of pipe, nails saved from old projects. The spirit of Matanai means never throwing away a piece that might one day be useful. This is one of those days. When you hold that copper pipe in your hand, cold and weighty, remember that it was once deep inside a mountain somewhere, and it will now give a current back to the earth. Now choose a patch of ground that stays moist. Under a downspout is good, or near a garden bed you water often. The soil should feel like a wrung-out sponge when you squeeze it in your fist. Too dry, and the tiny charged pieces cannot travel well. Too soggy, and the metals might rot too fast. Dig 10 small holes, each about a hand's depth, and space them a foot apart. The sound of the shovel going into the earth is a good sound, a sound of promise. In each hole, press one piece of copper and one galvanized nail into the soil, keeping them a few finger widths apart within the same hole, but not touching. The copper and zinc must have the wet soil between them, for it is the soil that acts as the bridge inside. Then, using your wire, connect the copper of the first hole to the zinc of the second hole. Then the copper of the second hole to the zinc of the third, and so on, like a chain. The exposed zinc of your very first hole becomes your negative terminal. The exposed copper of your very last hole becomes your positive terminal. This is called wiring in series. It adds up the little voltages from each cell, like stacking thin slices of mushroom until they fill the bowl. If your soil is moist and rich, each pair may give you about half a volt. 10 pairs give you 5 volts or more. Test it with a simple multimeter. You might see a small number appear, steady and quiet, almost like a heartbeat. If the ground is dry, water it gently with a watering can until the soil darkens. If the soil is very sandy and does not hold minerals well, you can dissolve a spoonful of plain salt, without iodine, in a cup of water and pour a little around each pair. Even better, work in some aged compost or old manure. This brings organic matter and the tiny electrogenic bacteria the university folks later discovered, which help the reaction. These little creatures, invisible to our eyes, join in the work, breaking down the food in the soil and releasing a faint charge. Do not use stainless steel, even if it looks shiny and strong. Stainless steel is made to resist corrosion, so it will not give up its electrons. You need active zinc and active copper. Corrosion is not our enemy here. It is the slow, willing sacrifice of the zinc that gives us the flow. But I must be honest with you. An earth battery will not run your air conditioner or your well pump. It will not power your electric stove. The voltage is low and the current is small. If you live where the ground dries out for weeks, the output will drop. In a drought, you must water your battery like you water your tomatoes. The zinc will slowly be eaten away over time. A year, maybe 3, depending on the soil and the thickness of the coating. You will need to replace the nails or the rods. This is not a thing you install once and forget forever. It asks for a little attention, a little care. The spirit of shokunin, a Japanese word we use for the craftsman's heart, is to tend your work with patience, to notice when things need fixing, and to not rush. There is no instruction book, no app, no number to call when it stops. It is just you, the dirt, and the metals, and that is a kind of freedom. Also, I must tell you that the wire connections above ground can grow a white crust if you live near the sea or in a humid place. That crust is corrosion, and it can break the flow. You should check the connections every few months, and if you see the white powder, take the wire off, rub it with a bit of sandpaper until it shines copper again, and twist it back tight. A small dab of beeswax or even a candle drip over the joint will keep the moisture out and let the electrons run clean. This is the tending, the quiet work of the shokunin, and it will reward you with years of service. What can you do with this little current? A string of small LED lights along a garden path can run all night, a gentle glow that costs nothing after the first hour of work. A soil moisture sensor, the kind that tells you when to water, draws so little that it can run for years. You can even trickle charge a 12-volt lead-acid battery, the kind used in small tractors or backup systems, if you add more cells and a tiny blocking diode so the current does not run backward. I have one such battery in my shed, kept full by an array of 20 cells buried near the compost pile. It runs a small water pump for our bird bath. The birds do not know it, but they drink water moved by the earth itself. In the evening, when the sparrows come to splash, I sit on the porch and watch them, and I think of the old coin and the nail, and the long line of knowing that brought that water to their beaks. I say this gently, as a guest in your country who has lived here many years, that the modern world has trained you to think that every need requires a purchased gadget. A plastic box with a chip, a sealed battery that will hold its charge for a few hundred sunsets and then die, and you must go back to the store and pay the same price again. The shelves are full of them, bright packages with promises of long life, and yet they always go silent, and then they sit in a drawer or a landfill, their insides still full of metals that could have worked for many more years if only they could be opened and renewed. This is not a fault of any one person. It is the way things have been made. The Earth battery belongs to that old world, where a problem was met with what was at hand. The ground under your porch is already an electrolyte. The copper pipe left from a repair, and a few nails from the bottom of a toolbox are your electrodes. The wire is a scrap. The knowing costs nothing, and yet the big stores do not carry it. The papers that list what you can get a rebate for, they do not mention it. Not because it was tested and failed, but because no one with a loud enough voice asked for it to be included. It is not a product. It is just a way. And Matanai, what a waste, that we have filled the earth with dead batteries while the living dirt itself can give a little power for years. I walk through the big warehouse stores sometimes, and I see the rows of battery packs, and I feel a quiet sadness, because I know the soil outside the back door is waiting, and yet so few know to bend down and listen. Now let me gather up all the pieces so they do not scatter. You need 2 different metals, copper and zinc. You bury them in moist ground, not touching each other, and you wire them together in a chain. The wet soil acts as the bridge that carries the charge inside, while the electrons travel through your wire outside. The more pairs you chain, the higher the voltage. Keep the soil moist and rich, and it will give you a steady tiny current, day and night, through all seasons. It will not light up your whole house, but for a garden light, a sensor, a small pump, it is a quiet friend that asks for very little. It is the same kind friend my grandfather showed me in the rice paddy, the friend that has been waiting in the ground since long before I was born. And if you tend it with the hands of a caretaker, it will pay back your effort many times over, without ever once sending you back to the store. So I put the question to you now. If you had a patch of moist ground and a few coins in your hand, would you build an earth battery to power a small light or a sensor? Or would you still reach for a store-bought battery that costs 10 times more, and in 3 years goes silent and must be thrown away? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone, and I truly want to know what your hands would choose. It is a small thing, but from small things, a way of thinking can grow again. The earth gives without a single pause. The rain falls, the soil drinks, and the metals do their quiet dance. It has been so for longer than any of us can count. The seasons turn, the snow melts, the seeds sprout, and under it all the current flows if only we make a home for it. It is only Matanai, a deep and quiet waste, not to bend down and accept the gift that is already there. In my garden at dusk, when the little lights come on along the path, I think of my grandfather, his rough hands, that coin and nail, and I feel that a little piece of the old knowing is still alive. And as long as we share it, As we speak of it across the fence or light a small lamp in the night, it will not be forgotten.